Hello, my name is Lucy Vetterhandler. I'm the curator at the Art Gallery of Southwestern Manitoba in the city of Brantford, which is located on Treaty 2 territory, traditionally shared by the Dene, Dakota, Anishinaabe, Cree, and Oji-Cree peoples, as well as the Métis Nation. Today I'm speaking to you from the main gallery, where I am currently the happy host of Drawn from Wood, an exhibition by 4 artists from rural Ontario who have responded to the process of making maple syrup. Today we can share a special treat with you, whether you can come down to the gallery in person or you have to tune in virtually. 2 of our artists, Blundell and Victoria Ward, have generously pre-recorded a talk from their home in the boreal forest right at the beginning of this year's sugaring season, which is to say when the days are warm and the nights are cold. They are situated on Williams Treaty territory, which is home to the 7 First Nations of the Chippewa of Beausoleil, Georgina Island and Rama, and the Mississaugas of Alderville, Curve Lake, Hiawatha, and Scugog Island. Please enjoy this video by Gary Blundell and Victoria Ward.
Hello there.
Hi.
I'm Gary Blundell.
I'm Victoria Ward.
And we're doing a little video for you guys to accompany our exhibition, Drawn from Wood. We thought we would do it at this time of year because it's March and because the exhibitions are about maple syrup collection. We thought this was a good time because, of course, everybody that we know around us here is collecting maple syrup at this time of year. And we have every intention to go and do a little bit of that with some friends on the weekend. Not back with Heather Smiths, but with some other friends who live locally. What can I say? I mean, the maple syrup project was a little bit outside of our usual purview, if you will. We have done a lot of work over the years investigating the impact of natural resource development on landscape, looking at the patterns left behind by the mining industry, logging industry, fishing industry, agriculture, various things like that. And we have been exhibiting work across Canada and in England based on these various investigations.
So as Gary was saying, we've done a lot of projects kind of all over the place, all over Ontario, Cobalt, Sudbury, Southern. We did a project with the Humber School down in Southern Ontario, and also in Yorkshire, England. And as he was saying, they usually focus on resource extraction and geological formation. But over time, I was fairly new to the visual arts. Gary has like a few more years on me. I came from theater, so my work has a kind of storytelling approach to it. And what I noticed over time was that everywhere we went, there were these remarkable stories that you never hear about. You don't hear the kind of stories that we would hear in these communities about the fact that the resource extraction or the landscape that people lived in and what it gave them had a kind of indelible impact on their psyche and who they were and their identity. So that was really intriguing to me. And my work is definitely not, I paint, but I also do a lot of sort of performative things. And I like to work in the realm of sort of Canadian Gothic genre, if you will. I don't really know what you'd call it, but I live in a log cabin, so I'm very attracted to, you know, stories like
Gothic Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of attracted to, you know, little log cabins and ice huts and shacks and all the stories that they tell. And over the years, I've done projects. One of them was I mashed up Little Red Riding Hood and the Communist Manifesto, and that was kind of like part. There was some art done with that. There was some writing done with that. There was a book made. There was, you know, it was performative. So I kind of work around stuff, and you'll see in the show that my work has a kind of narrative to it, because that's kind of my approach.
Over to me.
Over to you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was born in London, England, near St. Pancras Station. For anybody, any of you who know London, that's pretty downtown, and there's a lot of people who live down there or work down there. And I think after two world wars, I think my, you know, the extended members of my family on both sides of my family were feeling like they'd like to go live somewhere a little less crowded, maybe a little more safe. And we immigrated over here to Canada in 1962. And of course, you know, as a European British person coming to Canada, the first thing that we were all very aware of is just how much space there was for forests and trees and that sort of thing. It kind of, I mean, even as a little kid, I was a little bit, you know, blown away by just how much so-called wilderness there was. And I spent a lot of time as a kid rummaging around in abandoned mines near Ottawa, where I grew up, looking for minerals and rocks and that sort of thing. And my mother was a painter, so I was also very interested in art. We had a lot of art in the house, mostly prints. We didn't have money for originals, but I grew up with a lot of art around me, and my mother painting. And so I did a lot of art-related projects as well. And eventually, I thought, well, the one thing that really appealed to me was learning more about the Earth. And so I ended up getting a degree in earth sciences at the University of Waterloo. One of the things that I noticed while I was there was that the projects that I tended to do really well in were the ones that had some kind of aesthetic, you know, aspect to them. So, you know, I really excelled when I was looking at patterns on the Earth, both, you know, close up, like really close to the Earth, but also, you know, from air photos, all of that sort of thing. I just, anytime that there were Earth patterns involved in the courses, I did very well at that. I was not really a guy who wanted to get into the development industry myself, although I learned a lot about mining. I never wanted to work for a mining company or an oil company or anything like that. And, you know, quite frankly, when I finished university and I started painting in earnest, which I did for about 10 years before I started exhibiting any of my work at all, what I was really attracted to were places that had a very interesting kind of geological, geographic appeal or history. And but one of the things that I learned pretty quickly, I mean, initially, you know, as a European coming here, you know, I thought I was living in a vast wilderness. But what I realized pretty quickly was that actually the stamp of humanity was throughout the area around where I lived, not just from, you know, our indigenous heritage, but also from the natural resource development industry. I mean, it was just, you know, what I was visiting on a regular basis was second growth forests that had been logged, places that had been mined. And, you know, I just saw more and more and more of that. And particularly when Victoria and I met and we moved here, which we did in the year 2000, to our log cabin here in the Ontario woods. You know, we just, you know, saw that more and more and more. And my work went from painting scenes. I mean, as a Canadian kid growing up here, I was very enamored with the Group of Seven. I make no apologies for that. And I was drawn to trying to do work like them. But the more I investigated the world around me here, the more I realized that there was all this, you know, leftover patterning from resource development, and that became very interesting to me. And so it was the interplay between the patterns left down by humanity and the patterns that were there by nature, and the kind of push and pull between development and nature coming back and taking over areas after they'd been abandoned, and that sort of thing, that really appealed to me. And that's what my artwork became all about, which led us to meeting Heather Smith, and that's how this whole show came about.
We over the years, we met many curators and many people working in galleries and regional. Like, we moved into rural Ontario, so we thought it would be a good idea to start getting to know all the regional galleries, which we did. And we, you know, and then we wanted to move sort of outside of Ontario, and that's how you came to get to know Heather Smith, who was in Moose Jaw. And then we don't need to go into that, but anyway, so we got to know her, and then she moved to Ontario, and then she said, oh, you know, we just became friends. And she was like, you know, my family has this really great maple syrup setup down near but it's in a Carolinian forest. It's not in a boreal forest. And I think you guys might find it interesting. So we visited her and we saw it and the setup, and we thought it was amazing. And then we hatched this idea that, like, why don't we invite some other artists and to spend a week doing maple syrup, and then maybe some art would come out of that. And that's kind of where it all started.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for us, it was interesting in that Heather's family had owned a piece of Carolinian forest. That's not a kind of forest, like Victoria says, that we were particularly used to being in. It's a very different kind of forest than we live here a little further north. But her family had owned the property for a long time. So there was a lot of kind of personal heritage aspects with regards to the ownership of that property. And but they were wanting to do something with it to protect the Carolinian forest into perpetuity, and they donated it to the Nature Conservancy of Canada, but on the condition that they could continue to collect maple syrup there. And that would be the only sort of like land use activity that would continue to take place there. And they had a whole great setup.
They did. And so they invited Brad Copping, and then there were a couple of other artists, Kate Hyde and Thomas Aiken, that were a part of the original residency, and they opted out at some point. But they invited us all down, and we did maple syrup for a week. And Gary and I became kind of obsessed with the cabin that they had built. They had built a beautiful maple syrup setup, which you'll see in a video that we have here in this video, the video within a video. But they had also built a little cabin that you could stay in with a wood stove and a little bed and everything. And Heather's father is an architect, so it was just gorgeous. And I thought, oh, I was so enamored with that my work just went into, wow, wouldn't this be a great place to hide from the world? And, you know, there's so much mythology around that, obviously, being in the forest. And of course, I'm very well learned in what it's like to live in a little cabin in the middle of the woods. So it just, I don't know, the whole thing just seemed sort of a kismet or a perfect kind of serendipitous thing for me. And that's, so my work in the show really is about hiding away, possibly with your lover. And, you know, because the thing about maple syrup is you can just disappear. Like, we have friends who do it around us and they're gone. You can't, you know, there's no cell phone coverage. There's no anything. You can really seriously just hide away at your maple syrup and immerse for a week, because it's constant, right? It's a 24-hour/7 job, which I'm sure many of you know. And I'm sure they you know, so that's kind of where my work came from. And then you were more enamored with what was going on.
Well, I think for me, I mean, it was a little bit easier for you to find something to pick up on because, you know, you always paint, you really are attracted to little buildings out in the middle of nowhere anyway.
Yeah.
So there was something there that was a bit more obvious for you. For me, it was more about about the change of season. I mean, one of the things that I really am drawn to is at this particular time of year, how when the snow melts, all of this land, which has been under, you know, quite a few feet of snow, suddenly reemerges. And I'm very interested in the line between the snow and the land underneath it as the snow melts away. So, I mean, we were in an area where Heather's family, with our help, had set up a number of buckets to collect maple syrup throughout the forest there. And it gave me an opportunity to just walk around with the camera and with a sketch pad and just do some drawings. But it was really that the borderline between the snow melting and the land being re-exposed underneath it that I was really drawn to. And I also became very interested in the fact that not only did human beings collect sap to consume, but so did a lot of other creatures. And so I became very interested, particularly in things like sapsuckers and the patterns that they placed on the trees, not just maple trees either, but birch trees as well. And so a lot of the paintings that I have in the show are about those patterns, you know, the patterns between the snow and the earth, and the patterns that are left on the trees after you collect syrup, whether you're a human being or another you know, creature on earth here.
And that really goes to your work, really is always about thresholds and transitions and horizons and this idea of the place in between things. Maple syrup is this really interesting activity that's done between winter and spring.
Yeah, it's like a transitional time.
But it's a very pointed transitional time in Canada because the snow melts.
Yeah.
And so
we can be outside again like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Which feels like a miracle.
And it is. It's like March 23rd, 22nd today.
Yeah. 22nd.
So this is like, we know people at this very moment making maple syrup. And as you can see behind us, it's probably a pretty good year because there's still a lot of snow and it's sunny during the day. So
yeah, sunny during the day, cold at night. That's good maple
syrup. So
time.
in one of my pieces in the show, I have like it's a notepad on a piece of mylar, and it's just like messages that you would leave in the cabin to tell people what you've done, like how many buckets you've carried and everything, so that the next person coming to take up a shift would know that. But then, you know, what music you've been listening to and stuff. I added that stuff too. But I find that idea of the maple syrup, the activity of maple syrup, it really actually does fit in, just to go full circle, it really does fit into our whole concept of the fact that the wilderness is a place that we're busy in a wilderness, and everything is busy in the wilderness. And in fact, our ideas of wilderness are kind of conceptual. And
well, you wonder whether there's such a thing.
Yeah. And if you pay attention actually to something like maple syrup, I think you understand the sort of idea of time and mortality and thresholds and horizons and eternity and all that good heavy duty thinky stuff that we love.
We also like, I think I always like maple syrup. I mean, we've both done a lot of work on environmental issues over the years as well, both Victoria and I. And one of the things that's really nice about maple syrup collecting, which is indeed a resource use activity, and can be on a large scale or a small sort of in your backyard scale. but it's still a resource use activity. But the difference between it and a lot of other resource use activities is the fact that it's something that you can do. You can collect the syrup every year, and you're not really cutting down trees or killing them or
Well, if you're doing it in a small way.
Well, no, even if you're doing it in a big way, I mean, you do have to have a kind of rotation.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's not as destructive, but it still leaves a mark. I mean, there's still marks left on trees. There's still the fact that you've set up like a little you know, area in the woods to do this activity. You've created shacks. You've built buildings. You've put in a unit so that you can boil the sap. I mean, there is an impact on the landscape from people in order to collect it, but certainly it's a lot less problematic than you know, like a big giant mining operation, for example.
Well, it's activity writ small as opposed to writ large.
Yeah, exactly. So
I think that's it.
I think that's it. And I mean, we're very, very grateful to all of the galleries who have agreed to show this exhibition. And we're also very, very grateful to Heather Smith, our curator, and her family for allowing us the opportunity to spend time with them there, you know, engaged in an activity that their family usually does, you know, as a family on a yearly basis. It was nice that they included us and that we were able to spend time with Heather and her family and collect syrup for a week. I mean, it was really quite wonderful. And luckily, we snuck it in just before the pandemic. We were going to go a second year, but that was March of 2020. So that was the beginning of the pandemic, when we all got a bit scared about seeing anybody.
Yeah.
Rightly so. And anyway, so we're glad that this work is finally being shown. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you.